Good evening and welcome to Rise Up with Rebecca Seawright on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network. I'm Assemblymember Rebecca Seawright, serving the Upper East Side, Yorkville, and Roosevelt Island. We're joined today by a very special guest, Dr. Renee White, aka Dr. Nay. She is an inspirer, an educator, a leader, and through her spoken and written words. She's also a college professor, a motivational speaker, a published author, and president of her own consulting company. She advocates for empowerment, equity, and inclusion for others, especially women and children of color. Dr. Nay began her career as a classroom teacher in Queens over 35 years ago. She's now a full-time professor of education at St. Joseph's University in New York to better prepare her students for diverse classrooms, specializing in literacy instruction and culturally responsible pedagogy. Dr. Nay published her children's literature, Sister Girl, Step Into Your Greatness, and Yo Bro, Strive Toward Excellence, in order to fill the void of quality, diverse literature in today's classrooms. Poem titles like Sister Hair, Flavors of People, Black Lives Matter are meaningful topics to adolescents of color. She wants to show kids they can make a difference in the world as agents of change while reinforcing social, emotional learning and literacy skills. Dr. Nay also advocates for female empowerment. And to merge all endeavors, Dr. Nay created Renee's Way, Incorporated, to further aim to embrace and uplift underserved populations such as women and children of color. Welcome to Rise Up, Dr. Nay.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Rebecca. Thank you so much for taking out the time to chat for a minute.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you on the show today and to share your expertise as a professor and educator. Tell us a little bit about your work on raising up adolescents and women of color and empowerment of women, something near and dear to my heart as the former chair of the Assembly Task Force on Women's Issues.
Well, I have to say that, my journey for equity and equality has taken different forms over the years, over the 36 years I've been in education, starting as a teacher, wanting to focus on reading instruction in the classroom, becoming a reading specialist. And then I acquired my doctorate in educational leadership because I felt that I wanted to have impact on policymaking. But interestingly enough, I ended up in higher education. So now it's the idea that I am preparing teachers for the classroom. And also I have teach in-service teachers in my graduate courses. So it's the idea of, making a difference and impact. So that common thread has continued through the years. So through, academe, teaching, through academic journals and conferences, et cetera, I've always researched and written and spoken regarding the topic and preparing teachers for the classrooms. But now I've taken a little more of a creative path, and I have written what I call motivational poetry for adolescents in the classroom. So there, I look forward to speaking to students, sharing my story, because I am a little girl from South Jamaica, Queens, and also providing professional development for teachers, right? Because teachers unfortunately lack many of times training for diverse classrooms.
And do you have anything special coming up for Black History Month in the classroom with your students? And on the campus?
Actually, no, nothing special on campus. But I think that it's so important that, we really integrate multicultural education fully into the curriculum. When we go and we look at James Banks, approaches to multicultural education, we tend to focus on the first level, right? Contributions, where we do celebrate Black History Month or Hispanic Heritage Month or whatever month or week it is, right? And we may find literature, we may find movies, we may tape, posters in the classroom, but how do we further integrate multiculturalism into the curriculum? So as you move up the levels of multicultural education, the approaches, the top level is social activism. And what I love about the social activism aspect is that we want students to realize that they can have an impact on their school, they can have an impact on their community, they can have an impact on society. I mean, they can really rise up, right, to the task, and not become the trauma that they may experience. So yes, so it's the idea that we really need to, infuse multiculturalism throughout the curriculum, throughout the year.
Mm-hmm. And how do you go about empowering young people through your teachings and your books that you've written? And, what is the big motivating way that you can reach these students and have them become empowered and excited?
When you look at the research regarding diverse literature, diverse literature has so many benefits in the classroom. It affirms children, it empowers children, it raises their pride to see characters that mirror them. It also allows them to realize that they're a cultural group, right? Because when we think about multicultural education, we want to think about culture in a broader sense, not just race. So it's the idea for them to see their group represented, right? So it raises their awareness of how they are part of history. And also it gives them the opportunity to be exposed to different writers, different styles, different perspectives. And when I think about diverse literature, I want people to first, keep in mind that diverse literature is not just for diverse children, right? And some teachers, or students may say, well, I don't have a child from, another cultural group in my class. But I feel that it's just as important or even more important, right, to have multicultural literature in those classrooms so children can be exposed to different authors, to be exposed to different perspectives, to see other people represented. And when we think about the purpose of education, it's about preparing children for the global society, right? How do they interact? How will they communicate? How will they engage with people who are different than they? So that's very important. And one last thing that I think is important to remember when we think about diverse literature is that all diverse literature is not equal, right? Sometimes teachers tend to do what was done to them when they were in school, or to read books that were read to them. So they tend to rely on books that they're familiar with, or they may adopt, right, or inherit a library from the teacher who retired, who had the classroom prior to them, right? And sometimes teachers are quick to pull a book from a shelf because, there may be a picture of a character of a different skin tone, or the title may indicate that there's some aspect of diversity. But it's very important for teachers to be trained and to understand that it's quality, diverse literature that we need to focus on. And how do we evaluate the literature that we use in the classroom? And I'll just share one quick story with you. Currently, I am teaching my critical literacy course, which I truly love. It's a graduate course, and I'm teaching it during intersession. And one session, I have the students to read 2 children's books. And I have them go into groups to analyze the book based upon the assessment tool that I give them, asking questions as to, looking at the text, does it portray any type of biases? Looking at the characters, are they true representations? Is it a good story? Are the characters developed properly, etc. And it's so interesting because both groups said, oh, I would use this in the classroom. And then I send them home with an article. And the article is a very comprehensive evaluation, right, of the 2 books. And they come back to class and they're like, oh, wow, I've never thought of it that way, right? One student even emailed me and said, I don't quite understand what is meant by privilege. So the story was about this one little girl, American Italian, and she was going into all of these homes of the people in the neighborhood looking for her brother, and she was, tasting all the different ways that people can cook rice. And I had to explain to the student where my son may not have that privilege of going into people's homes, right? Because unfortunately, because of media and everything else, as society may portray, oh, you better lock your door, So it was the idea of explaining, a privilege, and she wasn't, aware of it, and what was so interesting is that she indicated that, it wasn't in her consciousness, because she didn't have the experiences to rely on. Even the aspect of white gaze, right? Because many books are written by white authors. So they're writing it from their personal perspective. They have good intentions, the authors. But remember that everything written is a social construct. So also, so the class, through reading the article, realized that the book was written from one perspective, and it was like the other characters were the others, right? You're looking at the language. How was the language used? So it's like us and them, or that rice wasn't normal, right? So it's very important for teachers not just to pull the literature off the classrooms, because it can do more harm than good if it's not representative of the groups of the students in the classroom. So that's very important for teachers to have professional development as to how do you select quality literature to use.
And that's so wonderful. It reminds me of the late Florence Howe, who was the founder of the feminist press housed at City University of New York Graduate School, where I chaired the board as a volunteer for 8 years. And she founded this in her garage at Goucher College, where she was a professor back in the 1950s. And basically, she said there were no women authors to teach in her literature class. And so she wanted to republish forgotten authors like Tilly Olson, The Yellow Wallpaper, and Marilyn French, The History of Women, she published, and so many authors. She got a grant and published Women Writing Africa, a whole series where they became course adoptions at colleges all over the United States. And so she was not just republishing forgotten works of women authors, but also, intersecting with the new authors. And so it's a wonderful nonprofit book publishing house called the Feminist Press, and in partnership with the University of New York Graduate School, where it's housed. It's a small nonprofit, but is now over 50 years old and the largest remaining feminist press in the world. So, so what you're doing reminds me so much of bringing diverse books into the classroom and exposing this to your students. And it's so important what you're doing. My daughter is in her first year as a special ed teacher, and she's bringing diverse books into her classroom. And so tell us more about what you have planned for the future and a little bit about Renee's Way, the mission of Renee's Way Incorporated, which you have founded. Tell us a little bit about its mission.
Renee's Way is pretty much a culmination of everything that I'm trying to do, right? So it's about empowerment, right? The mission of it is to empower people. And well, right now, I'm focusing on women and on children of color. But I want people to understand that, my books, people may perceive them as just for children of color, but they're for all children, right? Because all children can benefit from the experience. So looking at Embrace Your Power, a sister-to-sister conversation was the first book that I published. And I published that as a support system. I call it a vicarious support system for women, because, as we have so many responsibilities. We have so many, different issues that we can relate to, right? As women, no matter which cultural group you're from where you live, really what age group, et cetera. I mean, we all probably could have a really good conversation if we decided to turn off the camera, right? So that book, is a book of poetry that addresses various women's experiences about, self-love, about the various stages of life, looking at how we need to nurture ourselves, because many times we do not. We're always rushing, right, to take care of someone. And then also, to consider, what are your dreams and aspirations? So with that particular book, what, I'm doing with that is speaking to colleges, also speaking to various women's groups. Actually, I have a trip coming up in March to St. Martin to speak to a international book club about the book, the various topics. And also, I've developed some workshops regarding feminine leadership. And that's something that I think as women we need to consider, because oftentimes we feel that, we must assimilate, right? We must wear the pants. But we can lead with compassion, right? We can lead with those feminine qualities. So that's in regards to the Embrace Your Power. So I recently published my two books that you had mentioned in the intro, Sister Girl, Step Into Your Greatness, and Yo Bro, Strive Toward Excellence. And those books are really about getting diverse literature in the classroom, discussing issues or concerns that children of color may have. For example, Sister Hair was one of the titles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of each chapter, there are scaffolding strategies where students are able to, pull together to synthesize, their thoughts and their ideas,
Mm-hmm.
because it's all about children learning how to reflect and also how to use their metacognition.
Wonderful. Well, that's certainly your dedication to this diversity and empowerment, and through your books and your classroom work is so admirable. And with Women's History Month coming up in March, we need to continue to focus on the empowerment of women. I'm the lead sponsor of the Equal Rights Amendment in the New York State Assembly. We passed it in special session in July, but it requires 2 passages as a constitutional amendment. So we're looking to pass it the week of January 24th, which is the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. So I think it's just so important to have these educational materials available. And I have a question. The mission of Renee's Way, how did you come up with the name? Was there a Renee that was a mentor of yours that you named it after, or tell us about the name?
Well, my name is Renee. And, so Dr. Nay came about through family and friends, right? Because Dr. Nay, right? So, yes. So Renee's Way came about because years ago, we used to have family meetings. And I cook. I'm like the family hub, where, I do all the holidays and I cook all the food and, et cetera, what they call gourmet meals. I'm now trying to figure out, the gourmet meal for the Super Bowl. And so it was really a kind of push, like, oh, well, you need to like open a restaurant. And I'm like, no, I don't know. I want to open a restaurant. It's so much, work, and, I'm here teaching, and, and my children were younger, and et cetera. So sitting around the table with family, we were brainstorming, and somehow Renee's Way surfaced, because Renee does it her way.
Right.
That's who Renee is. Because I have my own, like, a style or flair or whatever you want to call it. So when it came time to name my consulting business, my sons and I, were thinking and trying to, come up with ideas, and we're like, Renee's Way, that came, that why start over? Why come up with something different? So yes, so that's where Renee's Way came. It just kind of circled back, and here we are.
I'm sure, Dr. Nay, that Renee's Way, you're having a huge impact on your students, and they're very fortunate to have you as their professor and your books. Tell us how our viewers can order your books. Are they on Amazon, online, in bookstores? What's the best way if someone wants to use your book and place it in a public library, it's a donation, or in a public school, what's the best way to get a copy of your book?
Actually, all 3 are on Amazon or any worldwide book retailer. But, most people, I tell Amazon is kind of, the easiest way to say it. Or if you go to my website, drnay.blog, there's a link for the Amazon page, but you can always just do a search and find it on Amazon. It is also now in the St. Joseph's Library. So it's on the World Library, or something where
registry.
So now it's in the exactly. So now it's in the library system. So it can be found there as well. So yes, so it is accessible. Or you can email me. If you want a autographed copy, they can do that as well, and I can arrange to have one mailed. So yes, so it is readily available internationally, because it was so interesting, because I was on vacation and I looked on Amazon, and I said, oh, there it is, but it was so interesting because they had all of the different countries listed, where you can have the book delivered, compared to with the United States. Usually it says for the United States address. So it was really thrilling to see that people, around the world can order it.
That's fabulous. And I know you have another book in you. So tell us about the future and what some of your projects, and are you in the works for another book?
I do have a couple of books on the shelf, that that I'm waiting, I'm holding out on, because I want to really get these up and running and into schools and out there in the public arena. So I figured, okay, I'll hold off on that. But the next one I think will be the one regarding love relationships. How, as women, how we have our ups and downs and some of the emotions, that we feel, etc. So that's coming down the pipeline. But yes, I'm looking forward to, just enjoying life and traveling and speaking. I love meeting and talking to people, as you know, and and making and opening up that communication, and providing a safe space to have the dialogue, that women can have, and then having the dialogue for children to learn how to communicate, their feelings and their thoughts, in a friendly way.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's terrific, and we appreciate so much shining the light on classroom education and diversity in your books on empowerment. And so this has been a wonderful, informative discussion. Thank you, Dr. Renee White, Dr. Nay, for joining us and sharing your expertise. I hope our viewers will consider our district office a resource. We have a no-cost housing, free legal clinic twice a month, and free notary services. And we are located at 1485 York Avenue, right next to the post office, or come visit us at the state capitol in Albany. We just gavelled back into the 2023 legislative session. I want to thank our viewers for tuning in to Rise Up with Rebecca Seawright on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Thank you.